dr chu tamchi ki sawa sim rangla thikbi rangsim ki natzalna sim ki sang shini chu tamchi lam kheshang dami pi to topan jervis 당 아랑소 되니 추지나 되니 수술라 요비 가서 다다 묶음 통야다 나와 거와다 되니 너나 왕보 고르가 나라 되니 가서 냠스 명한테 소상마 되니 자와디 코랑서 들나 강라 특이 어레즈나 되니 심라 특이 어레즈 소상마 심그 춤추라 버리스.
So all phenomena that we perceive, whether it be that which we perceive with our eyes or our ears or any of the other of our five senses, the very root of all this all phenomena is in fact our mind, and all of these other phenomena that we perceive are but appearances of the mind.
되니 춤추지나 간디지나 되니 뭉쳐 동그 모수스 되니 뭉쳐 동근 소고 되니 베나 강바 메살라 강바다 되니 샹 메살라 샹 메독 메살라 메독 되니 망보 거소고 되니 가솔라 되니 통화 되니 시에 그래지 뭉쳐 약보 되니 세신 근데 소고 연나 되니 메바 탐주보 요반다오다 요바 탐주보 메바 되니 시니 가소 묵디 되니 천조와 거소고 되니 시에 탑그래 되니 베나 뭉쳐 되니 동근 되니 그 되니 가소 사자 동바즈 그나라 베나 메독 올랑가다 되니 치다 되니 강바다 되소 망보 되니 그런 거 뭉쳐 되니 동용나 되니 디 값을 되니 메독 오마요 말이 치영 오마요 말이 되라 보즈 그더니 도수 상마 요 말다 인나 되니 뭉쳐 동근데 코란 거 니발라 되니 뭉쳐디 나서 뭉나라 되니 나와래지 디 값을 베나 랑가다 치다 메독다 되니 강바다 디소티 시디니 시바레지나 되니 디 뭉쳐 동근 거 뭐디 되니 좀쳐제지 고래지.
So in terms of magical apparitions or magical displays, we need a magician to conjure these things, and magicians with very good skills are able to create the appearance of buildings in places where there are none, of trees in places where there are none, of flowers in places that there are none. That is, they're able to conjure appearances of things when there aren't any, or conjure the appearances of no things when there are things. They are, through their magical skills, able to trick our eyes. So even though they are able to, through their skills in magic, they're able to create the appearance of flowers and water and other things in empty spaces. These flowers and other apparitions that we see are not real. It is through the power, the efficacy of the magician that these appearances are manifested, and we believe them to be real. So in terms of the various phenomena that we see, these appearances, in order for them to be there, we need to have a magician who is behind their conjuring.
되니 인딩 아주 수소라 요비더니 묶음 통화 나바가 투바 되니 나가 소라 리보라 빠지금 용화 디소 탐치도 강레지나 되니 아주 셈거 되니 나니 파르디니 쇼로라 샤르위 되니 증년 셈거 주년 어토인 되니 레스.
So all of these sights that we behold with our eyes, and the things we hear with our ears, the sensations of our bodies, the tastes that our tongue perceives, all of these things are but projections or appearances made by our minds.
양나 가서 빼나 염초 톡다 양나더니 심마가 탕라더니 남칼라 따나 더니 남칼라더니 강바다 더니 남칼라 랑코르다 더니 남칼라 메망보다 더소더니 당 통지요리 저시 종체르지는 통거리 인나더니 무슨 염초거더니 땅라더니 요리지나 요 말이 나데 심마가 탕라더니 남칼라더니 요 오리지나 요 말이 메나더니 티 코랑더니 다 과거 끝나라 니마고 오지르 잡니더니 니미 오지르 그 동초고 또그 더니 남칼라더니 또 종체르당 랑코르다 더니 뭐다 더소더니 능용와더니 저리.
So sometimes when we are near the ocean or we are in a desert, it is possible for mirages to be seen, including mirage-like cities on the horizon. And these mirage-like cities may be made up of buildings and people and other things that look very, very real, but in actual fact they don't truly exist in the desert or near the ocean. They are an appearance, a display that is produced by an interaction with light, sunlight, and the atmosphere. And it is this interaction that produces these mirage-like appearances.
어떠니 대당 잡고래 가서 되는 잠볼랑도 되는 가서 수수고 삼로 마땅나 배난 잠볼랑당도 되는 저 덴바리 상마더니 덴바당 되니 상마더니 가서 온 소화가 나라이 나가서라 판바신경 노바신경 되니 그더니 덴방 우만 잡고더니 레지 옛날 다른 가서 집그 거니 되니 제모 거니 딱시시나 되니 되니 말이 되게 딱시시나 저 상마 주민 잡고 장도래.
And it's the same, actually, in our real lives, in the real world. That is, we take everything around us to be truly existent, to be real. People who are good to us, people that are harming us, things that are good, things that are bad. We regard these as if they truly existed. However, if we investigate these phenomena in a detailed manner, we discover that they too are simply projections or appearances.
양나 배나더니 찜철 것더니 년치가 르름 거나나 정수 르름 거나라 더니 라코르타직 양 라코르타직 디마토 안장니도 마토가 요 말에서 찜철 거는 거나라 얘나 가서 먹겠다요나 더니 양자 먹겠다나 양더니 가동난 거래 증난 거래 나와냐나 더니 양 자난 거래 이게 난 거래 미즈미 난 거래 잠만 나 쪽만 거래 이때나 찜철 거나라 미즈미 요 말에 잠니 요 말에 라코르타직 더니 따다 마토 요 말에 띠 참마가 하고 그래.
Or we could use the metaphor of a computer operating system. In fact, the computer language is only made up of 0, 1, 0, 1. And despite the fact that the programming is made up of only these two binaries, in fact, we see with our eyes all manner of sounds that are produced by the computer. We see colors on the screen, we see forms, we see text, we see images. But in actual fact, none of these things really exist. The only thing that lies behind all of this is 0, 1, 0, 1. This is something no doubt that everyone knows.
ta tinji na na chok ba de so nga so khoso kang la thung de nga so ndi mangbo zum thong ya ti chawa ti kang la thung de na pe na teni mungchir tong kang mo teni korang ka lang ka ta teni chida teni mangbo len de de so chawa ta teni mungchir tong kang mo korang ka lakshi de la teni thog yore.
So what is the root or the origin of all of these appearances or all of these phenomena that we see? The different appearances that the magician conjures, etc. What is the origin or what is the root of all of this? Ultimately, it is the skill of the magician in conjuring these appearances.
teni namkha la nawi teni zhi tongcher ji teni tongcher nawa ti teni chawa ta kang la thung de na de chik teni khawu tang ni teni nima ga wo tang sum ti teni yang rangbo la teni nga so namkha la nawi teni tongcher ji yore de khona namkha la nawi yore teni ti chawa ta de la thug yore
Di somebody chire kambola.
somebody pe na hashi san lu sha ko no nge
Kambo
hashi san na pe na
kabuk teni nima ka wet teni.
nima ga wo ta teni pe na namkha la ti tongcher ji nawa na ti tongcher de yang rangbo na yo pi tongcher ji zunyin tan nang ga yore yang rangbo na tongcher ngoma yore te dang da bo yore te sum de khona ga chawa.
So it's the same with a mirage-like city that appears on the horizon. In order for this mirage to be produced, we need the air, the atmosphere, the sunlight, and the beholder from a far-off position.
teni simchir ga na la nga so zunyin mangbo ta ja mangbo ta teni ye ge ta teni jabar ta teni mangbo yo pa ti chawa ti kang la thung de na teni la kor tang chik ji te la thog yore.
And the origin of the pictures and sounds and text and everything else that is produced on our computer screen, what lies behind this is 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1.
teni nga so dan di nga so na mukum thong ya ta na tu nga so teni wangbo gor nga teni nyamsum yong injik tin de kang la thog yore jan teni chawa nga so sem la thog yore.
And in terms of the origin of the phenomenal world that our senses perceive, the origin or the root of all this is our mind.
teni tela jimson mangbu sha ji yore teni nga so teni jimson kashi na chang ri ko teni dem hong shi thog gore de kashi na nga so nyamnyung go ni shi go re ta ina teni ta tera nga so yang jimson mangbu sha pi teni ti chu yo mare.
So there are many explanations as to how this is the case. There are scientific explanations, there are experiential or phenomenological explanations, but we don't really have too much time today to go into much of this.
teni gangtar nga so shiro ko na do tan nga so sem la thog yore je ti na te nga so no shok teni sem chu teni na wa ta wa te re na te mare te ka gare.
So in saying that the outer or the external phenomena that we perceive is but an appearance of our mind, this view, however, is not the same as an idealistic or an idealist view in Western philosophy.
ta ti ndi nga so zambalang te la teni jirchu jab go na teni so sem la jirchu jab jang na teni rinju yore te nga so chire na zambalang ga na wa so tam chu nga so sem ga na ni par yong go yore ti shi na teni sem la ngerwa jab na teni ta zambalang ga na wa so la teni ngerwa mambo zu rimgi yong gore.
So in order to change the world, it's necessary for us to change our minds. And the reason for this is that if the external world does originate from our minds, then by making changes at the level of our mind, gradually, the external world will be changed too.
the rikshit mambo to te toden gi mang ta ten na ta nga so terang di kaps nyam se len ser te rikpa ga teni sha pa mambo ta ne teni gi shel z mare ze teni de nga so nyam nyung go tone teni sim la ta se teni zo la sha kre.
So for this, discard the numerous methods of conceptual analysis and rely on the pith instructions. This verse is referring to the fact that the meditation method that we are learning about today is not one that requires conceptual analysis and investigation and so on. It is a practice or a method for experiential understanding.
Kanang de shokte rang sim la ti pi che jiang mum chu ren ding na ne ba ji sha nam to na so pam chu na nge wa ji sha oya tani ta nga so sim la tani ta wi ne kam na ji shirtang nga so tani sim la ta to machine pe na le ka mambo le samlo mambo tang dang mambo ja tani jira mambo kum tani shi pi kaps tani nga so tani sim ti kan ri re mare te chawa ni dang jab ko yo mare tani khayang ko mare nga so sim ti pe shu tang ni tani khorang sholo la tani samlo mambo tang le ka mambo le ni tani shi go ina tani pe shu tang ati la samlo tang yo mare pe na nga so tani nyog yigip chna yigip chna nga so yigip ti tani yak po yong da ma yo te samlo tang yo ma to ba nyog te la samlo tang yo mare yigip ji kaps nga so yigip lan dang jab ko ma to nyog lan dang jab ko mare tin da pore nga so namjin sim ti pe na nyog da pore nga so sim lan dang jab ko 말에 되니 이게 라부터 쇼를 거더니 우보도 소리 쇼를 거 우보란 당 잡고 마도 되니 심란 당 잡고 말이 디 값을 내가 아주 샘대 간디진 하고 요 말에
In terms of observing our mind, usually we are not doing this when we are focused on our external lives, work, thinking, we're busy, we're preoccupied, we're occupied with a lot of activity. In this situation, we're not thinking about what the mind is, we're rather using it to do work in the external world. And we can liken this to using a pen. When we're using a pen to write words, we're really focusing on the writing of words and we're not contemplating the pen itself. And so we can say that it's like this when we're busy with our activities, we are really focusing, using our mind to achieve these activities. We're focusing on the writing of letters. We are not focused on the nature of the pen itself or the nature of our mind. And so for this reason, we don't have a good understanding or realization of our minds.
Teni nima chila nga tso yeke mambo tene teni yeke njok sem teni vjerne yeke troba ten sam jerne teni nga tso nyola jimju shipa teni tengo tsek bare.
However, if on one day we finish with our writing of words and we lay down our pen, or we then pick it up and begin to examine it, then our investigation of the pen begins from this day.
Teni nga tso samna kemsar teni nyogan teni chongchong teni zgana la ngai nima mambo yeke tsunayo te zaya chik jamon tu tinala teni yerambo tsokondu teni ngarang nyogan teni shogo tola tsuna nak tinali nak sa te mar yonggendu ma tsuna teni shi jang nak sa yonggendu te kemsar kan na samne teni korang nyogala jimju shipa teni ngotsuk songse.
And then at this one day, on this day that we decide to begin to research the pen, we will pick it up with an attitude of wonder, and we will think, how strange it is that this instrument that I have been using to write letters with every single day in an endless flow is like it is. When I press it to paper, ink flows forth. However, when I lie it down, no ink comes out. What a strange thing this pen is. And this is how we will think when we start to research it.
어다 때당 잡고 시니 되는 가서 다 니마질라 가서 심라 짐주시 되는 거 찍니 어다 남긴이 나 가서 심 거랑 배셔 땅에 내가 담으라 mambo 레니 녀 답시 거리다 나랑 소되니다 심딜라 되니 짐주시 거 찍니 다 가서 심디 간디 따고운데 삼니 니마질라 되니 심 거랑라 가서 짐주시 기랑 심 거랑라 되니 딱십시 되니 대인 거 찍 바래.
And it will be just like this on the day that we decide to really start to research our minds. These minds that up until this point we've really used in order to do work in the external world. When we begin to look into them, then our examination or investigation of them will begin.
되니 심라 짐죽 다 간디 제거 그러나 되니 자르 바거더니 라팔라 되니 되니 심라 짐죽 되니 mambo즈 되니 시 바래.
So how do we go about investigating or examining these minds of ours? Well, scientists themselves have many ways of investigating the mind by looking at the processes of the brain.
디지다 인나 때가 디 코랑 그 셈고 ngo마티 하고 덮고요 말이 ngaso 셈고 나라 남통 담으라 mambo키나 되니 라방 나라 열완 저거리 띵 열와티 시고 요리 마토 바 셈 코랑 ngo마 타카타크 되니 ngaso 추차간 게 나타 덮고요 말이.
However, by using these methods, it's not possible to discover the essence of the mind. Through examining the mind using various machines, it's possible to register changes in brain processes that take place as a result of changes in the mind. However, using this approach that relies on the external investigation of the mind using machines and technology, it's not possible to discover the mind's essence.
당 ngaso simla takarta ni pena ngupundela dorjindela tini muk takarta ni parla tini ngupo jang kang par machu par takarta taban rawti tindi goni sarus tagona ngaso simtela sis tagori muk tagori ta nawa tagori ta yana lakpa ragore kandi gore zina tichiki yang thap mari sim khorang tagori.
So it's just like if we wanted to look at this dorji directly with nothing coming in between us and it, nothing to obscure it. In this situation, what would it be that needs to observe the dorji? Would it be our eyes or our ears or our hands? What would ultimately be that which observes it? Well, none of these things are necessary. It's simply a matter of the mind observing itself.
어다 딘디 ngaso 뭐 리본디나라 요피티니 ngaso 거더니 왕본도 소나라 심라 따똥큰 심라 드니 따똥큰데 심 코랑 마토 잠바 시경 요 말에. ngaso liga wangbo zena mega wangbo na wangbo la sa ba teso nangla deni simte la taka korang ta deni ta tong kin de seri ta tum kin de seri na sim korang re korang chi ba ma to jamba chi yo mare jamba chi ki ta tum mare.
So in terms of the different sense consciousnesses, our different sense consciousnesses, or in terms of the mind itself and the mind consciousness, there is in fact no other thing or no other one besides the mind itself that is able to observe these things.
다틴디 인디 페나 가서 묵 잡고 가서 묵 잡고 있는 데니 코랑 같은 실라 따탑 그래 실라 참아 코랑 그 시그레 마도 봐 코랑 결록 잡네 데니 묵 나라 따탑 그 말에서 묵 잡고 있나 코랑 난 간디 코랑 따탑 그 말이 실다 따따고 그래서 묵 잡고 있나.
So if we take the example of our eyes, they are possible of looking outwards into the external world and perceiving phenomena in the external world. However, it's not possible for our eyes to turn inwards on themselves and see into their internal structure.
되니 샘틴디 저리지나 샘틴디 말이지 되니 샘고 코랑 그 실라요 따탑 그래 영 코랑 그 나라요 따탑 그래.
However, our minds are not like this. Our minds are not like our eyes. Our minds have the ability to both look outwards and look inwards.
어때니 다 맞춰 어때니 셈라 따고나 되니 맞춰 디 리본 디토라 거랑 맞도 바잔 따튼 그렇게 하면 되니 다 거랑 라 따지고 그래 거랑 거 따위니 끝까지 따고 그러잖아 당가 연청 맞춰 파르코니 쇼로라 따고 그래 따서 거니 되니 거랑 라 따고 그래.
So, in terms of looking into our own minds, there is no one or nothing else within our own bodies that is able to do this other than our minds. So, just as these minds of ours have been able to look outwards, we need to turn the mind inwards in order to look at itself.
다 대표잖아 가서 강반디나리 말은 존이 실로라 토니 되니 고야르 전에 남칼라타나 아니 마통 통지요 말이지 양나 남칼라 좀 봐용 근데 양나 남카 좀 봐면 홍보용 근 대니 마통 빵가 좀 통지 통야 스마즈요 말이지.
So if we were to leave this building right now and go outside and lie on the ground and look at the sky, there are only two possible things that we could see. Either we would see the blue sky or we would see clouds. Aside from these two things, there is nothing else we'd see.
당가 좀 낭라더니 따위네 끔 나양더니 아니 마통 통지 메.
And also, when we turn the mind inwards, there are only two possible things that we will discover.
니도 강레지나 땡아서 따위네 끔 나 양나 가서 셈티더니 따위네 끔 나 셈티더니 소무시니더니 거랑 빼나 장부 총총 치고 장부 총총 거 나라 농자와니 메비네 끔다 보시니 더니 남쪽지경 메바더니 땅무 고니 데요 요래 데나 가서 가성 공나 셰피 가성 가서 니마치라 셰피 더니 더니 라코르 거더니 남바테리 티토라 호보시니 남쪽 마치니 다요비네 거제 데치그레.
So the first possible state that we can discover when our minds turn inwards to observe themselves is a state of stillness, like we described yesterday. A pond when there is no wind, a pond whose face is completely still. This is a state of no thought, a state of resting at point zero. This is the first of the two possible states that we can discover when we turn inward to have our mind observe itself. And this particular state is what we refer to as stillness.
양나 가서 셈거나라 따위네 끔 나더니 든지 그 장부따 장 놈에 빠따 마임바 더니 남쪽만보 셈거나라 끼니 더니 남쪽 찍지라 찍지 나마 나서 봐 양더니 양 따양 네발라상로 따양 마웅발라상로 따 거 할리바 욕자더니 고름 요 말이 르 디토라더니 합시고 럼바요 말이 지지요 말이 차디요 말이 더니 욕자더니 그 남쪽만보 끼 요리 더니 디 잡보즈 갑갑스 더니 요리.
So aside from this first state of stillness or resting, the second possible state that we can discover is one where our minds are giving rise to thought activity, a great deal of thought activity, possibly thoughts of all kinds constantly streaming up from our minds, thoughts about the past, thoughts about the future, thoughts that have no order, that chaotic, that come in all shapes and sizes. And this kind of state is what we refer to as movement. So aside from these two states, there is no other state that we can discover our mind in. So when we lie down and look up at the sky and see it as a blue expanse, then this is the same as discovering our mind in a resting state or in a state of stillness. And if we look at the sky and see it obscured by all kinds of cloud formations, then this is the same as discovering our mind in a state of movement.
Tani ta yang tina lak sembazi ore sembat kang rezina koran nam tong mambum choyona o ta ngarang nam tong chondu sambati ni koran kam chowati nyamsum yong watere tini yang nam to te kate mumchu ni tini ni yona o ta ngarang nam tong de ni de nyam de tini na ni pati nyamsum yong wa de rezita chonam chowa nyamsum yong wa tam chowati hago wa tini nina ni pati nyamsum yong wa tini ni pati saru hago wa de te khasang aso kongla chepi gum japi ne kblaina ngaso semlatani sem kanala nam to yo me te sola tasr kongla yo te tang ni shikpare.
In addition to these two states, there is also a third possibility, and that is one of awareness or experiential awareness of the state that our mind is in. So this is an awareness of whether our minds are in movement, experiencing movement, or whether our minds are resting. The experiencer, or that which is aware, or the awareness of this state, is also a third possibility. And this is what the same as what we were speaking about in yesterday's teaching.
Tati namjin pena ngaso namkala pena gorsalan joni namkala tana. Tanazi pena ngaso njokbado tindina pena njokbada ngama gtini ngama murgti soyina ko takbar namkala tagri namkala tani ta nima khashi ganala nam basari ta basa mari yana tini namgo namshi yabo yongsari ta mari ko gtini namgo la mambo tagri zite ngama mo soyina.
So people in bygone times, such as nomads, etc., quite often look to the sky in order to determine how the weather would be in over the coming days. That is, they would look at the sky in order to see whether rain was coming or whether good weather was coming.
Teni tartaina ngaso chemnala kangbaangala deni lekama bolini kummokumshini teni khabar gongla tani ongaso namshi kanda yensari maumbi zangprochikanala namshi kandi yongsari charwa babsa are khang babsa are teni namshi go todang kachi wasari teni ngaso namngula yarta mare khabar gongla marta gre.
These days, however, we spend most of our time indoors working away at our busy tasks, and when we want to know what the weather is going to be, we turn to our cell phones, and they tell us what the weather is going to be like in the coming week, whether there'll be rain or snow or how hot it will be. We no longer go out and look to the sky to discover these things.
근데 되니 남시가 되니 좋아다 장와 좀 촌시가 앙장대 좀아도 봐 남칸고 마틴 통인이 봐요 말이지 미망보고 딱 말이지.
So aside from what they see in their mobile phones, numbers that represent what the temperature it will be and words that represent what the warmth or coldness will be, nobody turns to the sky anymore to discover these things.
되니 다 가서 네 값을 검잡이네 그럼 나빼나 나가마가 뭐 좋은다 보시니 되니 장가라다와 많이 남가 코랑라 다 그러다가 된진다 보시니 되니 가서 셈라 따용디 되니 다 셈들이 내근도 다 셈들 좀 좋은데 삼바 코랑 뭐마tin 통거래세 가서 장가즈라 따 말이 남가 뭐그 몸보 코랑라 무스 따wan다고 야나 남가라 쩐요나 되니 차밥고요나 차와대 무스 되니 가서 밥고요 밥 먹금 통한다고 된지시니 다 내나 내요 봤더니 초남 초고요 봤더니 따 그래.
So in meditation, we are like people in the past who have looked to the sky to discover the weather. In looking at our minds, in observing our minds, we are aware of whether they are giving rise to thought movement, whether they are in a state of movement, or whether they are in a state of stillness, whether they are resting. And in so doing, we are like people who look to the sky to know what the weather is going to be. That is, people who don't rely on numbers and information to tell them, rather people who look to the state of the sky and the state of the clouds to know how the weather will be. And by observing our minds, observing when they're resting, observing if they're moving, then we are acting in a similar way.
되니 아마 뭐 대소이나 고소 상마 되니 랑숑 감다 코리라 차지 할리 받침 보여래 뭐 수수 시그리 남칼라따니 되니 농잡을다 점바더니 돌르다 대소라따니 되니 남카 남시 야보 용사리 말에 되니 남시 장모 용사리다 존보 용사리 되니 뭐만 보고 되니 아마 뭐 대소 고소 하고 그래.
So people in earlier times, they really had an very intimate familiarity with the natural environment. They were able to understand the wind and the formation of clouds, and by being able to read these signs in nature, know whether the weather would be good or warm or however it would be.
되니 다상은 되니 뭐도 좀 가서 카브라 톨라따지 되 마도 바잔 지금 남시가 되니 칠리 반다 마도 바잔 바저 남시라 직직 차지요 말이 자만의 시가 말이.
However, people these days, aside from knowing to look at their mobile phones, have got no understanding of how the weather operates at all. With the exception of expert or professional meteorologists, the average person has got no understanding of the weather really.
되니 대비 짐승진 가서 랑숑 감다 가닥 제닥 제랑 저거요. 랑숑 감라 가서 차지 제메 저거요.
And so, for this reason, we become ever more estranged and ever more distant from the natural environment, and our familiarity of it becomes less and less.
어떠니 금 잡는 가서 타가 타거더니 되니 금 잡는 가서 셈라 따듬 컨테츠 베나더니 아마 먼저 보시니 거랑 거는 셈된 거만 든지래 삼니 거랑 거 타거를 냠순용하고니 신ken 문기만 남지 남시라 따wan다고 든지 타거 고쳐고 따 그래.
So those practitioners who directly observe their minds in meditation and directly observe the state that their minds are in are just like these people in the past who looked at the sky in order to know the weather.
되니 금 막점내 가서 되니 르피 종lik 찍보즈 그 통에 가서 셈 내리지 바 된리라지나 되니 가서 따스타베나 남시라 카버 거 올라 따wan다 버레스 르피 종lik 장바이나.
If we simply rely on conceptual analysis and theoretical investigation in order to assess or understand the way that our minds are, then this is the same as someone who simply knows how to look at their mobile phone in order to understand the weather.
든지 인디 다리 가서 니 값을 되니 파타거를 따니 되니 가서 셈 초나 단테 좀 좋은데 좋아져야 된 든지저래 거랑 든지 좋은데 디질라 든지 용근데 삼바고 냠용 거고니 야보시고 그래.
So in this meditation, we directly look at our minds, we directly observe them. We see if they are in a state of movement, and if they are, how they are moving, and what happens after a thought arises. We directly observe the way that they are like this.
되니 언니 바이나 되니 언니 비값이나 당내 셈데 되니 다다 남통 좋은 언니 바인데 되니 언니 바세야 된 리즈라 제근데 언니 바든 리즈래 삼바고 거랑 타거를 되니 언니 바든 냠슴용 덮고요. 된지 그 되니 초남 초와 냠슴용 하당 언니나 언니 바 냠슴용 하딜라 되니 가리제 그래. 딜라 르바제 그래.
So by directly observing the mind, observing it in a state of rest, that is, observing that it is currently not in a state of giving rise to thought, directly observing what this state of resting is like, to directly experience it in this way, or whatever state is it in, to directly experience our minds, whether they are moving or resting, this direct experience or direct observation is what we refer to as awareness.
되니 르바지한테 가서 다리 공나 샤바테레 르피 종르 코네 가서 딱시 잡네 셈테 연남 초고 그래 연나 내고 드리즈 말이지 르바가 딱시 잡아서 말해 영 가서 남똑 거더니 남똑 거는 삼로 땅에 내셈 초건도 드리 초건도 연나 내 셈테 닌도 드리시네 내도 삼바 드니 말이지 가서 가서 공나 샤비 냠용 거니 가서 공나 잠바당 시신 거니 냠용 영랑 보니 따고 그래 셔요 어떤지 거더니 내나 드니 내 바데 거랑 거 냠스 용화당 다네 추남 추와데 냠스 용고 그래 마토 바더니 삼로 땅에 초건도 내건도 드리 말이지.
So this awareness is not one that entails us conceptually investigating or conceptually examining the state that our mind is in, or discursively asking questions about the state that our mind is in. It is a direct experience of our mind, similar to what we were talking about yesterday in terms of mindfulness and awareness. These entail a watching of the mind from afar. So if the mind is resting, or whether it is resting or whether it is in a state of movement, the direct experiencing or direct experiential understanding of the state that the mind is in is what we mean by awareness.
Tini namjin tini targo goreza ngaso namjin nyamlim shipini kumna tandela gum jabse gore gum tizina kandiri zina tini korang sem ko semla tani ta sem cho yona tim chowa de hago nan de yore ma to ba dam cho ung jugum de ngarang yin dam dam chowa de mar mam chowa shi go sam ba tini go mare korang chonam chowa de hago go gore tele jang go mare.
So in our frequent practice of this meditation, when we bring our minds to observe themselves, it's sufficient if our minds simply observe, are simply aware, they're knowing of the state that they are in. So if our minds are giving rise to thought movement, it is sufficient for our minds to simply be aware that this is the state the mind is in. There is no need to think that, oh, here my mind is giving rise to movement, I should stop this, I should change this state. This is not what we mean at all. It's simply a state of knowing or being aware of the mind's state.
Tani semte ne yona tini ne pati ota nina ne pati hago na tini jikre koso ramjin tini ramjin tela girju jab go marezi girju chingni girju jab morgozi nini koso tini ramjin tela tini tektok morgo ganso tektok morgozi tini korang kandi yina yimbati hago ni tini nyamsum yong go re ma to ba ngaso ne yona ta te korang ne nduk te nduk mo korang chol go nduk samba da ota chogo yona chogo nduk tan nduk mo korang ne go nduk samba tini go mare gangni na te hago na den nduk yore tela rik pa gre.
And it's the same with resting too. Our minds simply observe the natural state or the state that our mind is in. And if it's in a state of resting, then we simply are aware of this. There is no need for us to change the state that we find our mind in or to interfere with its state in any way. Simply to experience and be aware that the mind of the state that the mind is in is what we are aiming for. So finding the mind in a state of rest, thinking that we should make it move, or discovering it in a state of movement, thinking that we should bring it to a state of rest, this is really not what we are doing. Whatever state the mind observes itself in, simply to rest in this awareness is what we refer to here as awareness or rikpa.
Tenim chowi kapsa kandi hako go zena pe jangna ngason de gum jamni de yo pinin komne ti khamba go no ni yar teni zge laoshu zge yar tongyong ni teni dina la ko yar ro ma ro teni pan ro son ro ma bo zu shi de na teni ngaso mu ge rim de yo de korang pan ro ndo san ro ndo samba de rik yo yena teni te korang jo par ma ro chen ro go ze chen ma ro yana ma ro go de ngaso te kola girju gyap ti zge ge teni sholom de la girju gyap ta te sok shi ba da de jang go ma korang pan ro na ro san ro na ro gang tar ngang so gum jamni teni tam mu ge teni korang pan ro wa san ro wa teni tong de yo yena pan ro ma chok san ro go 판로나 득보리 저용나 약보든 지 삼로지가 말이데 그럼 통되나 득을 베틴다 보고 그래.
The state of being aware of the mind in a state of movement is similar to sitting in a room with the door open, looking ahead and noticing a mouse sneak in the door and dart across the front of the room and then dart across backwards in the same direction. In this situation, our eyes are observing the mouse, we see its movement back and forth, however, we don't seek to change what it is doing or to interfere in its path whatsoever. So although our eyes are seeing the mouse, we're aware that it is moving back and forth, we're not thinking, oh, it should go that way instead of this way, it should go this way instead of that way, or going this way is not good, it's bad if it does this. We don't have any thoughts like this at all. We're simply aware that the mouse has come in, that it is moving back and forth, and yes.
Teni yang aso gum jabi nekam na teni ni bi nekam na teni ta ni bi nekam na teni ta gang zhe na teni yang zge chong chong de ko pan ro chen ro xie xie ni yang par dik dik ni yang ting hon de la yong ne teni ko ran ji meng ni de na 내가 저 거랑 때니 등등 삼바트 신나 저 거래 마도 내 견등년 그 말에 단 졸고 그래서 야나 단 존년 그 말에 단 듣고 그랬더니 gir주 잡고 말했대 거랑 등등거나 온 등등 삼반다고 했더니 무금 통등 받더니 여러 마도 봐 결혼 등나 약 보래 결혼 전화 약 보더니 삼거 말에 된다 보래 니비 값이야 된다 보 니바테 신나 저 거래.
And in observing the mind in a resting state, this is like sitting in the room and watching the mouse that has been scurrying back and forth finally come to a stop and sit perfectly still in the middle of the room. And in this situation, we are just simply aware that the mouse is now resting, that it is still. We don't seek to change it or transform what's happening. We don't seek to make it move or otherwise change what is taking place. We're simply aware that it is now resting.
Teni ni thola khasang asang kongla teni gum ja bine kamna jengni gum bine kamna thapsi manjawa ge teni sheyo teni gbo teni thola thama pesho tang chokore.
So yesterday in our teaching on Shamatha meditation, we mentioned the 9 methods for bringing the mind to rest. And it's possible to, or in this meditation that we're talking about, all of these 9 methods can be used.
Die Tabkubo Chaman di tola pesho tana chokore.
Oh, that's it.
다 드세요. 어때니 다 가서 대 검잡을 때 되니 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 신이 검잡되나 때라 구바카리 어르잖아. 내가 가서 어때니 남진 되니 셈거나라 되니 다저 가와다 영나 되니 셈거나라 교와다 영나 공초다 되니 만보스 되니 공야용 되니 영 말을 되니 셈거나라 되니 틈 되니 만보스 시대와 되니 가서 발담모 다 되나 르데 그래. 되니 르데 되니 지만 가서 냠용 강토 본 거래잖아. 어다 나랑 가심 가나리 나랑 가심 득나리 참아 코랑 셈거나니 야용이 되니 영말 셈거나라 되니 영말 틈로도 코랑 빼남 jamsogo nani barna yarione jamsogo nala martin tumjongwa jamsogo nani yarione bal hali pa chimbo tin yone mombo kang chak mombo ne yang kono mar chinala tumjongwa chinala tum sati yang cheri sari te jamba jimendu o tinda bota dena dugna nawa tamchu tin jirendu sambala nishi hali pa yak boto kore yen rambo nyamning shi tabna.
So what is the function or the use or the benefit of this kind of meditation? Usually our minds, feelings or emotions of pleasure or suffering, of anger, through meditating in this way, it's possible for us to observe their arising from our mind and then their, after rising up, their disappearance back into our minds. So this process of rising and disappearing or rising and dissolving. This is something that through being aware of in our practice, in the future we can in the future we can bring to our understanding of how these appearances work in our mind. So just like a very big wave in the ocean, a huge wave that rises up several stories high, big enough to, bigger than a large house, even a wave this big ultimately crashes back down into the ocean. So observing the way that our minds work in this way in terms of thought activity and emotions, etc., it's possible for us over a extended or sustained period of practice to really generate a strong sense of confidence.
Destre jend chana gard gna wa na zoran sim le charge tenye te tembe na ti rangi siu te siti na wa tam se sim ji na na dong chu gons ota ti kapse teni ngaso na wa gabo shona mar gabo shona chama te gang yin na nga rang sim ge teni namjir cham ren de ma to ba jam ba jim du sambati ha ko re.
So by practicing in this mind, then we will be able to know that all of the very appearances that arise in the mind are simply manifestations of the mind. This is something that we will be able to know.
Oya teni ngaso laling ke tholan suwa na la teni ta kan shi go re zenaz.
So many people ask, so how do we go about actually applying this in our everyday lives?
Teni suwa na la ngaso chama mususulan jabu njare chama kapkap sim gawi kapsi ore teni kapkap sim margawi kapta multipi kapta teni khongcho chimbo lang kapta teni ndopa chapo shong kapta teni sim kana lang yerwa na chokba yong ore teni ngaso chama chibari.
So in terms of our lives, everyone is exactly the same. There are times when we feel happy, there are times when we feel unhappy, moments when we give rise to great anger or moments of extremely intense desire. Ultimately, changes of this kind, our mind changing all the time, is a situation that we all have in exactly the same way.
Teni ngaso sim kana la marchi pa teni shong kapsa tape na sim kana la khongcho rawo teni shong kapsa ta ngaso namjin ngaso le kalele ti kanji zrezina khongcho shong kapsa teni yana ngaso khongcho ti 춘준시 맡으면 양나 가서 무잠발라 팔더니 시시했던 거래지. 양나 다른 대리 정도 보시오나더니 무잠발라 더니 야비고 그래.
So in a situation such as anger, usually when we feel very angry, our first response, if we're unable to control it, is to speak harshly, to scold the person in question, or if we are even in a more intense situation, we might reach out and physically strike the person.
더니 노바 차보시오니 더니 시 값스더니 양나 가서 끝이 그래. 끝 맞아. 양나 초코래더니 양나 후모죠. 더니 잠만 보시 그래.
Lomo jobs enough?
Lomo taofan.
Oh. In a situation where we are overcome by very strong desire, then we might steal things or rob others or beg for things.
더니 양 심마치 바더니 쇼네 더니 다 제 통초단 도바 마임바 더니 뭐 잠바스 그 소소치 제나 더니 심마치 바더니 쇼이 값스 더니 간디 셰거 제나 더니 가서 창망분 통거래. 더니 두자 그래. 어야 더니 장통거래 두자 그래. 더니 잠만 보시 그래. 양 자만만 보자 그래. 더니 가서 더니 셰 그래. 남진 가서 돌을 때 더니 그래.
Or at times when we experience unhappiness, general unhappiness, then often we drink alcohol, we take drugs, or eat a lot of food.
더니 양 대소라 때니 양 가서 셈까나라 양 딜리장 맞지 반중 거래.
However, by doing these things, our minds become even more unhappy than they were to start with.
더니 다 득보고 지스 양 득보숑 득보고 지스 양 남바숑니 내가 저 더니 직족좀 매 받는 지를 런도.
And in this way, one unhappiness follows the other, and our unhappiness really becomes an endless cycle.
Tani ta nga chun di gum yamning shen kanzi na gandhi shi go re zena tani nga chu sem kana la ma chi pa dang tani tindi shona sem kana la tani dungmer ta tindi shona ta changdong sa man ro ze tani tugda kala za te ma za ze zama mang bo yang ma za ze tani gari shi go re zena ta mar ndungni gum te jab to mo to ta goes.
For practitioners of meditation, what should we do in a situation where we experience unhappiness and suffering? Obviously, we shouldn't turn to drink or drugs or eat an excessive amount of food. The best thing to do is to sit down in this moment in meditation.
Tani ti kapsa nga chu mar gum jab ni so so rang la tani lipo la dakbo jab ni nga so yin da mandang gum jab ko samni tani samna ti kapsa nga chu sem ko nga chu la gari ze gare zena ni gum jab ko mun samni ni gum jab ko mun gum jab ngar ga yin da manda tela par tani shi tang go ngar ga yin da manda tela jab go samni tani nga chu sem ko rang la te ze gare.
So if in this moment of unhappiness or suffering we decide that we want to act in our body's best interests and sit down in meditation, what is our mind likely to say to us? It is likely to say, I don't want to do this, I don't want to meditate.
Do
you think that this is how it often is?
Yeah. Everyone's
like this, so am I. And this thought that arises in our mind telling us that we don't want to meditate is something that we need to fight against, we need to struggle with. And in terms of the victor in this struggle, it has to be ourselves.
탕 땅보 탕니바 탕선바 디솔라 그런 것들이 제거래다. 갈리갈리 되니 그런 것들이 제거 말해. 당린 진도래.
And in terms of this struggle against our mind, the first time, the second time, the third time, the mind will still continue to struggle will still continue to say that it doesn't want to meditate, but through continuing in our process of struggle, finally the mind will come to accept our preference.
배나가 졸라 콩초랑이 값스 되니 시험당량지 곰나 되니 콩초대 매바창도와 가서 점승 거통에 주비종을 거통에 시겨래 되니 시험당량지의 강디 곰고티 곰설때서 탐지 보여 가서 창마 차창서 시겨래 레디티 값스 되니 가서 자와니 시험량지 곰 놓고요 말 되니 곰금은 나 인담다 콩초랑 거삼니 되니 삼겨래.
So, for example, when we experience anger, we know very well in theory that by doing compassion meditation at this moment will bring us benefit and will enable us to calm down our feelings of anger. Even though we know this in theory and we have a complete knowledge of how to go about practicing compassion meditation, nevertheless, when we feel this anger, our minds tell us, I don't want to practice this meditation, I don't want to practice compassion, I want to feel angry.
되니 코랑 그 또식 뒤값서 할리바가 또식 침보래죠. 코랑 할리바 또식 침보래. 코랑 그 또식 뒤에 나랑보치 그 또식이라 보여야지 뒤값서.
And the power of our mind at this point, the power of our angry minds is extremely strong as an elephant.
되니 가서 타카타카 콜라더니 다 람시나 탑고 말이죠. 가서 또뒤 코랑 그 따와니 잔 탑고 말이 코랑 할리바 또치 보여래.
And when our minds are in this state of extreme strength or power, it's not possible for us to directly bring it under control.
And if
we were to try to put a rope around the neck of the elephant and bring it under control, one person alone would not be able to achieve this. So what do we need to do in this situation? Well, in ancient India, people would place a metal hook or ring in the nose or the trunk of the elephant, and only by using this were they able to pull it along.
근데 코랑 좀 말랑 위네끔 나가서 갈래 티 저기도 잠바당 시비진지 잠바 시비진 거 갈래 곰잡네 소나더니 코랑 거 또식디 제총 로는데.
So we can liken this iron ring that is placed in the trunk of the elephant to mindfulness and awareness, and this needs to be slowly inserted into the trunk of the elephant in a time when it is not angry.
야, 때인디더니 다 마음 반응 가서 상마가 던디 쉬고 가서 샘 멋지 비네급나 더니 장통산 조냥 그 말해진 코랑 로그 인세 그랬다 이나 더니 조냥 그 말에 코랑 란 탑수치고 그래 더니 더 양때 샘 멋지 비네급나 코랑 그 자마자고 코랑 자마만 뭐 포 또고 말다 이나 코랑 그 자고 제니 더니 제 그래 자마자 중냥 그 말에 양때니 코랑 샘 멋지 메네 코랑 총칸 가나란 조니 잘랑만 보 열고 코랑 그 제용 그래 이나 티네급나 코랑 란 탑수치니 더니 대서 장마 더니 쉬 직냥 그 말에.
So in the future, everyone needs to do this themselves in times when we feel unhappy, and our minds tell us that they want to drink alcohol. We need to struggle against this. Or if we're feeling unhappy and our minds tell us that they want to eat a lot of food even though we're not hungry, then we should not accept this. Or similarly, if our minds tell us that they want to go shopping and buy a whole lot of things, then we should also not accept this.
야나 그런 거 쪽보즈라 카버스 땅에 되니 되니 더 갑다주시고 삼용 거죠. 있나요? 쪽보 양보즈 많이 나 쪽보 두보즈라 갑다시나요? 때 샘처데 지친도 그래.
Or in this situation, to call up a friend and to tell them all of one's woes. If the person you call up isn't a good friend, then it's possible that your woes will only increase by doing this.
되니 대소 탕마 탑시 말이지 탑시 약슈 뭐 되더니 가서 되니 그 세마케 받았더니 용원에 그러나 대저 문만 보면 받더니 늑사 대저 요 뭐요 따니 되니 늑사 얼마나 따니 되니 말 늑니 되니 가서 남쪽 라따야 돼 탑시 약슈 되래.
So none of these are really solutions to our unhappiness. What we should do when we feel ourselves when we experience unhappiness or suffering is see whether we can go to a place where there are not too many others around, a quiet place, and sit down in meditation and bring our minds to rest and look directly at our minds.
Teni ti kapsa ngacho tambuni jabjig yapo yogo re ngacho ta ngarang ke simti korang ke zamazago korang chongkong na landro ko chokbola kapar jabgo teni te korang teni zeg changtong san ko teni zeg reta ko teni zeg ngori ta ni yindaman da te ko teni tonggemen yindaman da korang ke kala nyengemen yindaman da korang la tapsushi go yindaman da koli ngarang gergo sambi teni jabjig to tambuni yogo re.
But it's important that we first have that we're mentally prepared. That is, that we know in advance that our minds will tell us they want to call up our friends, they want to drink alcohol, they want to eat food, they want to go shopping. We need to be aware that this is what our minds are going to be telling us, but determine, resolve that we won't let our minds make us do these things, that we won't listen to our minds, that we will struggle against them, and that we will achieve victory over them.
Teni mar ndingni teni ta pena nga sim teni chekemena ngarang ke sim ma ki pinam to kandi yong ndu samne teni tana teni sim ma ki pinam to tambo yong teni sim na la mar ke pa zo teni teni shegre tarung mun teni te ta tamna teni korang mar teni sim kana la partham teni me par changdo re.
And by sitting down in meditation and looking at our minds when we're feeling unhappy, we will see that unhappy thoughts arise, and they will continue to arise for some time. But by continuing to be aware of them, they will begin to dissolve, they will begin to disappear.
Teni ngacho la teni toni yakha kolma chi kolma ni teni thopsong na teni ngacho sim kana la hwadang yong gore zixin hwadang yong ni ta sim ma ki pa yong na yak bore te ngarang ko jong dru na ko yak bondu ngarang sim ma ki pa yong na ga samni teni sambat yong gore.
And by achieving victory in this way one or two times, then we will start to increase in our confidence, and we'll begin to see times when we feel unhappy as opportunities to train our minds, such that we begin to even prefer times when we're feeling unhappy than moments when we're feeling happy.
Teni ti kapsa teni ngacho namgin inna teni ngacho kumchok la teni soran demni lama kumchok son la soran demni da mimang bogo ngarang la simaki padang ngarang la shawa lamjo teni mayong wati songa mipa teni ngala shinlup teni nang rochi ngarang la sim kepodang ngarang la sim demo yong shawa lamjo yong teni teni shinlup nang rochi teni ngacho namgin teni son dem da shina teni shegare ze namgin.
Usually our habit is when we feel unhappy or in a time of not so good luck, our habit is to go before the Buddha and to pray that the Buddha bless us to eliminate our unhappiness and our suffering and bad luck, and to bring about our happiness and good fortune. We pray to the Buddha in this way. This is how we tend to be accustomed to acting.
Teni ti kapsa ngacho son dip jambaz re nandung jambari ti kapsa ngacho son teni komchok son la sora damni ngarang la sim maki padang ngarang la shawa lamdu me padang teni ngarang la nunshik tang sim cherda teni ngala tang rok chi zeni teni ko son dip shegare teni ngala tang na ngarang ke te la teni jongdur shi tab gare nga teni tang rok chi ze darung teni ti chuchung da ti chon chopam ban kan so chuchung lam chopam ban sor kan doni ngarang la shawa lamdu mayong nga sim maki pa teni tang rok chi zeni teni zegare ti kapsa.
What we in fact need to do is make a different kind of prayer or a different kind of supplication to the Buddha. And that is one where we pray to the Buddha that unhappiness and bad luck, pressure, worry, bad fortune, in fact, be brought upon us. We pray that the Buddha may bless us by bringing upon all of this ill fortune, and in so doing, give us an opportunity to train our minds. So we pray to the Buddhas, we pray to the protectors, that they may rain down unhappiness and bad luck on us.
Oya ina ti kapsa ngacho la mangsi ti yo gore mato ba mangsi chi mena nga teni te semaki pa tang rok chi na teni sana maki pa yona hali pa khaboris.
However, it's necessary that we have some foundation in our practice before we make this kind of prayer.
Teni ti kapsa nga semaki pa mak tang rok chi zeni de zegrezi ti kapsa.
So when we just start out, it's okay if we make a prayer that unhappiness and bad luck is not rained down upon us, because it might be a bit difficult if it is.
Oh yeah. Teni ngacho yang namjin pe ngacho 저 천자다 산자다 영티 샹다티 소 카시카시라 영티니 ngacho pe nandelang la hayorin dinang la jibda yori teni zecho yori teni shangdi jan teni chi teni so teni mar mebashi teni shina teni namkhani tok japjada teni jamda lungchim boyong teni ge jamda mambo yong yori namjini nam chama te la zabzab shigri teni ndinji ge nyamni yakbo chini te teni padang yong kinto so kocho chi ten joni teni shangti yona mar jet teni sako manyin se sa so ku teni chi teni yang ku manyin se sa so ma ku ni teni ta tok jamna yapshok ta yakbore teni lung ina la yik teni kandi shi yona she shok teni shine teni kocho
So in Tibet there is a belief that in bodies of water and in the earth as well as in trees, that spirits reside, and that these spirits are capable of punishing humans if they are not treated in the right way. And so for this reason, people are usually extremely cautious in the way that they treat these natural formations, or the way that they treat the natural world. However, those who feel confident in their practice often go out and deliberately cut down trees and dig places in the earth that they're not meant to dig, in order to invoke the punishment of the spirits, such as lightning and strong winds, etc., as a practice opportunity. And this kind of practice is referred to as jut.
소송 침부시거나 동반이 그동 또 그래 마도 정리 장 와서 그런 거 말이에요.
However, to really be able to work with these extremely large challenges, it's necessary that we first have a realization of emptiness. Doing so simply on a foundation of shamatha is not sufficient.
뒷면라 랑일라 소송에서自我挑战.
This approach is referred to as self-challenging.
되니 낭바가 거랑 저 세비자던 거 마디 먹장란 탐니 약할린 곳에 말이야. 장란 탐니 약할린 곳에 그래서.
And in fact, the basic principle of Buddhism is that the object that one seeks to achieve victory in respect of is not someone external to oneself, but one's own self precisely.
되니 먹장란 탐니 약할린 켄터서 가서 문조아미 로지가 돌아 야동 좀 범이 와래서. 옛날 동 오부통니 운이 전에 먹지랑 약하토야 말이야.
In the course of human history, fights that have been waged in respect of external enemies have been countless and endless. And we can say that, in fact, despite all of these struggles against external enemies, there has been really not even one victory.
되니 장란 탑니 되니 약하토소나 장란 탑수시니 약하토소나 되니 약하토바 무마들이 베나상지 시작했다 봤다는다 그래.
However, in terms of those who struggled or battled against themselves and achieved real victory, there have been figures such as the Buddha.
어야 되니 당하랑 저 대랑건 하도 되니 차트도 되니 주족송. 단저서 마녀 돈에 니데 장나 이거 너지